lot of the material that we're covering in this lecture, you're going to find there on this pandemic busters. And let's talk about...
on the table at $20 if anybody wants.
That's right, in the back there at the end. So let's talk about the most dangerous drugs. I'm going to mention a few of them. In our hypothesis on how we treat people for depression, we try to find what are the root causes of depression so that we can make the right changes. And these are the 10 categories that we look after. We're trying to see which ones of these are actually present so that we can make the right changes. And if you notice, on number 5, we actually deal with the factor of addictions. Addictions can cause depression, and that's why we deal with that. We learn a lot about the brain in recent years with a name, Phineas Gage. Phineas Gage, he was a worker in putting the train tracks in the state of Vermont in the eastern part of America. And Mr. Phineas Gage, as he was doing his work with a metal bar, they would make the charge, then they would turn on the match and run away because the thing was exploding as they were trying to get rid of the rocks as they were going through the train tracks. Well, something happened. And as Phineas Gage was trying to compact that charge, they think that they put the mixture incorrectly. First they put the sand, then they put the explosive powder. So when Phineas Gage put that bar there, created a spark, and that thing functioned like a missile, which started blowing up. And it literally went a little bit under his eye, above his head, and then flew a few meters behind him. And we learned quite a bit about the brain because of this accident. Because now scientists could study what happens when you damage a certain area of the brain. And sure enough, I actually seen the original one of Mr. Phineas Gage. If you go to the University of Harvard, they have an anatomical museum and they have the actual skull of Mr. Phineas Gage. And Phineas Gage was no longer Phineas Gage. That's when we learn that the character is encoded there in that part of the brain. So the brain, we classify it in different areas, and different areas of the brain have different functions. If you notice, the frontal lobe is the frontmost. And in the frontal lobes, we have our character. Who we are is encoded there. In secular neurology books tell us that you can find also spirituality, morality, and the will is encoded in that frontal lobe. So this frontal lobe is where your conscience is located, where your morality, when you determine what's right, what's not right, your frontal lobe is doing that function. And as I mentioned, your personality, your character is encoded there. And whenever you take a decision, you should consult that frontal lobe as, is it correct, yes or no, should be the most important part. Then, the antagonistic part of the brain is the limbic system. If you were to get the brain, you cut it by half, and then around the middle, towards the bottom, that's where you find the limbic system. In the limbic system, when you get angry, that anger comes from that limbic system. When you have passions and so forth, they come there from that limbic system. And then what is not frontal lobe and what is not limbic system, this one has to do more with the reason, common sense, and the intellect. Now, something interesting is that the brain gets fully developed by the age of 10, but it continues internally to flourish, and that's the reason why females are more mature than males. Because females, by the age of 25, their frontal lobe is complete. While males, it takes until the age of 30 for that frontal lobe to be completed. And it is the most sensitive part of the brain. And that's the reason why, before we deal with the drugs, we need to understand this, because drugs, the first part of your body that they're going to start affecting is going to be the frontal lobes of your brain. And the reason being is because of the circulatory system. So blood, the big blood vessels enter the brain through your neck, and then from the center of the brain, they start branching out, and the farthest part of that brain happens to be the frontal lobe. That's why that's the most vulnerable area when somebody is like drowning and they don't have enough oxygen, the frontal lobe. And in that frontal lobe is where you have things like your inhibitions. That's why sometimes alcohol is taken to remove those inhibitions, and then even there's changes at the level of the personality and so forth, from somebody quiet now start being talkative and so forth, because you're affecting their personality and character. And we're very special. We are not a monkey. We're way superior than a monkey, because our frontal lobes are bigger than a monkey. A monkey, from the whole brain, only 17% of that brain is frontal lobe. Compared to the humans, 33% of the whole brain of the humans is frontal lobe. You have been given the brain to take good decisions, It's up to us if we want to use it or not. As well as the dog, only 7%, and the cat, 3.5% of the whole brain of the cat is frontal lobe. That's why the cat does whatever he wants, and he doesn't care, isn't it? The cat thinks that he owns you instead of you own him, That's the way the cat operates. In the 1940s, 1950s, before we had all the toolbox of modern pharmaceuticals to treat mental illness, somebody had the not so bright idea to do what is called a lobotomy as part of mental health treatment. So they would take that instrument that this man has in his hands, they would put it under your eye, reach your frontal lobe, and smash your frontal lobe. That is not a good idea at all. John F. Kennedy, the president, that got assassinated in America, he had a sister, and the sister got this lobotomy. It completely changed her life, as without that frontal lobe, many of your important functions are impaired. So, Mr. Howard Dooley, his dad remarried, and he went with his dad, and his new mother, which was not his real mother, didn't like him. And just because she didn't like him, she took this poor little kid when he was small to get a lobotomy. And he even has a whole book about it, how it changed completely his personality. So we could divide the three areas of the brain when you're taking decisions as your frontal lobe. That's where you have your morality, where you determine what is good and what is not good. And that's where the conscience is located. Then what is not frontal lobe and what is not limbic system, the intellectual part of the brain, answers the question, is this something logical, yes or no? And finally, in the very center of your brain, in the limbic system, that's where you have the emotional side of things, and that's where you decide, is this something I like, yes or no? So whenever you're taking a decision, go ahead and consult your 3 parts of your brain, but remember, the frontal lobe should always be the one taking the last decision. And the reason why we deal with the frontal lobe when we deal with mental health is because there's an interesting, there's a lot of research that was done in which they answer a question. Do suppression of the frontal lobe causes depression, or does depression cause suppression of the frontal lobe? And you can see here in this imaging, this image is trying to show you how active the brain is. It is documenting how fast the cells in those areas of the brain are consuming nutrients like glucose. So you can see the one on the right, the men that recover from depression. Notice those red spots in the top? That means a lot of activity, very, very active. And if you notice on the left side where the depressed brain is, you don't find those red spots. There's less activity in that brain. And just by looking at the recovered brain, which areas of the brain are the most active, as you can see there? The frontal lobe of the brain is the most active. So a researcher that dedicated his whole life on this topic determined that things that suppress the frontal lobe are going to give as a consequence depression. So that's why in our depression program, the focus of the therapy is to find things that may potentially be suppressing the frontal lobes of the brain, and 2, start to do things that stimulate the frontal lobe of the brain, such as hydrotherapy, exercise, music therapy, spirituality, and all these evidence-based interventions. When you combine those, remove things that suppress the frontal lobe, do things that stimulate the frontal lobe, you get absolutely impressive results in the recovery and how fast patients recover from depression. So, let me get back to this one in a minute. So, notice what caffeine does. This is a published paper, and I'm quoting, the results of the published paper. Caffeine affects the immune system and central nervous system, memory deficits, and changes where? In the frontal lobe and limbic system, affecting potentially problem solving, judgment, motivation. All those 3 are the function of the frontal lobe. Attention, memory, learning, emotions, and even empathy is impaired because in our frontal lobes of our brain, that's where we have our empathy. That's one of the challenges there from that caffeine. Einstein had a certain pattern in the frontal lobe that gave the region an unusually large surface area. When Einstein died, he donated his brain to science, and they've been studying it ever since. And they found out his frontal lobe is, bigger than average, which may explain why, he was so smart, to try to come up with all this, physics and so forth due to his unusually large surface area. This one, A 10-minute run can make people happy and boost brain performance because of why? It stimulates what area? The frontal lobes of the brain. As I mentioned to you, things that improve the frontal lobe are gonna improve your mood. That's why the happiness increases. You know, when you wake up and you feel like, I don't feel like doing stuff and so forth. That's exactly what you need to do. You need to go out and do some exercise so you can stimulate that frontal lobe, not the opposite. Caffeine and this type of things that suppress your frontal lobe, as I will show you in a minute. And this is my study. In this study, we were documenting how nicotine. It's interesting. If you ask the smoker, why do you smoke? Some are going to tell you, well, because I'm anxious, and when I smoke, it kind of relaxes me. The funny thing that we found in this study is that if the person quits smoking, the depression and anxiety actually improves. So you don't need to be dependent on that cigarette to help you, with the anxiety levels and so forth. This also another one of my studies. In this study, we documented a very interesting phenomena, big sample, 5,757 people in our study. We documented how if you're violating your conscience. Now, which area of the brain we said your conscience is located? Your frontal lobe. So, violating your conscience is something that suppresses your frontal lobe. So that's one of the things we do in our therapy, to try to encourage you not to violate your conscience. So in that way, we stimulate that brain so that it can work in an optimum fashion. This other one, how those marijuana, the chewables or smoking or medicinal in triple quotation marks, those things suppress your frontal lobe. That is not good. Look at this brain that this person was using marijuana 4 times a week. And this is not an anatomical scan. It's not showing you the actual brain. It's showing you the function of the brain. And do you see those holes there in the top part of the brain? That's exactly where the frontal lobe is. That's what marijuana causes there. No wonder why people with marijuana in their system more likely to go in a car accident. Because you need your judgment, No, I shouldn't go here, I shouldn't turn here, I should stop. That's impaired, so it's like if you're drinking alcohol. And this one, very interesting. One of those crazy shooters in America that was shooting people, he was using benzodiazepines. That's a group of medication that we don't like in our depression program. And we actually help people stop those medications because they make the depression worse. As I told you, things that suppress the frontal lobe increase the risk of depression. And look at this one, fascinating study. Pornography use correlated with the erosion of what area of your brain? The frontal lobe, the prefrontal cortex, and that's not good. Remember this crazy shooter, the one that tried to kill Mr. Trump? Look what he did before trying to shoot Trump. Tom Shooter searched for porn before shooting Trump. He had to suppress his frontal lobe so that his conscience, wouldn't be bothering him and so forth, and try to, do that without regrets and so forth. So yeah, that's exactly the issue with this type of materials. The good news is that you can do something for things like those benzodiazepines. There's another one of my studies showing a tremendous decrease of usage. You can see at the beginning of our 8-week program, you see it on blue, and then by the end on that yellow. Tremendous decrease in the amount of benzodiazepine usage. Now, some people, first thing in the morning that they do is suppress their frontal lobe with a cup of caffeine. And this caffeine, some people have convinced themselves that, oh, if I don't drink my caffeine, I won't be able to function. Well, there was an interesting study that was done in Bristol University. And what they found out is, if you compare caffeine drinkers versus non-caffeine drinkers, caffeine drinkers go through this yo-yo. They, in the morning, as they are craving that caffeine, they don't feel good. So when they measure how alert you are, how normal are you functioning, non-caffeine drinkers were functioning normal the whole time, while caffeine drinkers had to drink the caffeine to feel normal. Imagine that. That's not a good deal, isn't it? In fact, in their study, although frequent consumers feel alerted by caffeine, especially their morning tea, coffee, or other caffeine-containing drink, evidence indicates that this is actually their reversal of the fatiguing effects of acute caffeine withdrawal. So the reason why they're drinking caffeine is that they unconsciously know that if they don't take that dose, they're going to start having this terrible, withdrawal symptoms. In fact, another study was documenting that those withdrawal symptoms are similar in the effects that chemotherapy causes in your body. That's why you feel terrible, as you're trying to stop that caffeine and so forth. So here it is, what I'm telling you. See, you can see on the green how alert the people are that are not taking caffeine, while the people that take caffeine, look at that, their alertness is cut by more than a half. And among the most common sources of caffeine include coffee, tea. There's many things that the English gave you that are a good thing. Caffeine is not one of those in tea. Something that the English taught the Australians to do. Many soft drinks, chocolate, and some pain relievers can be a source. So you can find this video on my YouTube page, as I was showing you. This reporter, this is ABC News, a mainline television station in America. And the reporter takes this functional MRI, measuring the blood flow to the brain. Then she drinks 1 cup of coffee and repeats the functional MRI. This is the brain before the caffeine. This is the brain after the caffeine. 40% of decreased blood flow to the brain. You think that's good? No, you're suppressing the blood also to the frontal lobe, and that is the last thing you want to do. That's the reason why I want you to do exercise. So you can increase the blood flow to the brain through the exercise. And here is this thing suppressing the frontal lobe. Drink coffee. Do stupid things faster with more energy. I found this in a gasoline station. And there's this interesting experiment. They had this spider. They put this spider to do its normal spider web. And then they injected this spider the equivalent to 2 cups of coffee, the caffeine on 2 cups of coffee, of course, adjusted to the size of the spider. And then they put this spider to do its spider web. This is what it did. And then after 48 hours, still, look at that spider web. It took 96 hours to finally make a normal spider web. This is my study. presented these results at the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. And these are the results. We saw that people that drink caffeine more likely to have a conflicting conscience, more likely to pick up other addictive habits like alcohol and cigarettes, more problems with their sleeping, and more irregularity in their meals, lower adherence to other lifestyle practices, lower consumption of fruit and vegetables, and a worrisome one, less consumption of tryptophan and folic acid. Those two elements are essential for a good mental health. So as you can see, not the best results when we start checking the other factors. And this is another one of my studies. In this study, we're documenting that people that use caffeine more likely to have that marker called the high ultrasensitive C-reactive protein that measures inflammation in the body. And you do not want to have high inflammation, as you increase your risk of heart problems, dementia, and many other problems. And also, they had lower levels of vitamin B12, caffeine users. Look at this one. 10 consequences of coffee and caffeine: disrupted sleep, addictive cycle, the jitters, elevated blood pressure, decreased blood to brain, brain dehydration, lower brain connectivity, GI problems, inflammation, and the famous post-caffeine crash. I'm telling you, this is a bad deal. It is not a good idea. Among other problems, increased risk for stomach ulcers, increased risk of stomach cancer, kidney cancer, lung cancer, rectal cancer, esophageal cancer, colon cancer, ovarian cancer, pancreatic cancer have been documented by the use of these drinks. 300% increased risk for heart attacks. And not only that, when the mother drinks the caffeine, that caffeine starts coming out in the breast of the mother for 80 hours. So now you're suppressing the baby's frontal lobe and so forth. And this is a funny thing. People are trying to take all these vitamins and minerals, which, by the way, most of them you actually don't need. You just make expensive urine. But they're taking all these pills and so forth and drinking caffeine. And caffeine will throw away your calcium, your B vitamins, and your iron. Not a good idea. And here are some of the things. This is from Healthline, just a mainline educational site in the internet. All the problems that it can give you: headaches, irritability, increased risk of oral cancer, problems with the heart, problems with your stomach, diarrhea, nausea, increased urination, high blood pressure, problems with your bones, and so forth. So how we're going to stop the caffeine? We're going to eat a good, healthy breakfast of whole grains and fruit. We're going to drink plenty of water. And when we get, those symptoms that we need to have that caffeine, breathing exercises and aerobic exercise. So what are you going to do instead of caffeine? You're going to do some good old hydrotherapy. Hot water, 3 to 5 minutes. Stop the hot water and put the cold water, as cold as you can handle it. I'm telling you, that's going to wake you up, I guarantee you. So what are we going to use instead of caffeine? Well, this is something that you could use. Look at this very interesting study. This is published in the scientific literature. They had these people think about somebody that they love very much. Do you have somebody like that in your life? All of us have somebody like that, isn't it? So, as they thought about that, they studied what areas of the brain were being stimulated. And notice it was the frontal lobe. Do you see that blue part? Exactly where the frontal lobe, it illuminates nicely your frontal lobe. and a little bit there in the occipital lobe. And then they ask people to pray. And look at what happened. Exactly the same areas. You can see on that yellow, that frontal lobe is being stimulated as the person is praying. Prayer is the opening of our hearts to God, just as we do with a friend. So, doctor, what's the most dangerous drug? Well, there's this very, very interesting study that was done. They were taking into account not only the harm that it causes to themselves, but the harm that causes others, their communities, crime, family issues, and so forth. So when you take into account all those variables, there is absolutely no question about it that the most dangerous drug, according to this study, is what? Is alcohol. No question about it. Worse than heroin, worse than cocaine, worse than that meth, cocaine, tobacco, amphetamines, and the list goes on and on and on. I'm not saying the other ones are harmless, but the reality is when you take all the factors into account, it is the worst drug. Look at this one. 2.6 million people died from alcohol in only 1 year. And the study says alcohol is now considered a class 1 carcinogen, meaning it is known to cause cancer. Just like asbestos causes cancer, just like tobacco causes cancer, that is how carcinogenic is. See, we can classify substances as things that maybe cause cancer. We're not sure. There's things that for sure don't cause cancer. For example, oranges don't cause cancer. Apples don't cause cancer. You can do experiments with this. But we know that alcohol for sure increases the risk of cancer. And look at this one, very interesting study done in the UK. They started tracing back different types of cancer and what had caused those cancers. So, as you can see, 1/4 of all the breast cancer directly related to alcohol use. So those colon cancer and the other ones also increase risk. Alcoholic beverages can cause at least 7 types of cancers, including breast cancer. Alcohol need warning labels like cigarettes, said the study. As the cigarettes, when they buy them, it has this label there, this product causes cancer and so forth. They're saying alcohol should have those cancer warning. And we know the science behind why the cancer is increased. Because of the different substances, it starts to create the perfect environment for cancer to thrive through those chemicals that are generated as the body is trying to disintoxicate that alcohol, as it creates oxidation. In other words, it makes you age faster, alcohol. It alters the hormones and also increases the absorption of carcinogens. That's the last thing you want. You want to get rid of those carcinogens ASAP. And the problem is that many people are not aware of this. This is a study in America, but it also reflects the mentality in the Western world. How only half of the Americans know that alcohol causes cancer. They know that radiation causes cancer. They know that tobacco causes cancer. They know that asbestos causes cancer, but they're not aware that alcohol is one of those problems. They confirmed that drinking a single glass of wine a day triples the risk of suffering from cancer. That's not good, isn't it? To triplicate your risk of cancer. And this is a very worrisome study especially for Australia. Look at the color that Australia has. Australia is seeing a tremendous uptick increase of cancers among young people. And one of the main things they pinpoint as why it is so high, the cancer rates in these young people under 50, especially in Australia, alcohol is number one in their list. U.S. General warns of alcohol linked with certain types of cancer. Alcohol is one of the leading preventable causes of cancer. In other words, if we were to stop drinking that, we could actually decrease a lot of that cancer. I told you so. Why the American Cancer Society says what? To stop drinking. So they are seeing, that this is increasing the issues. Quitting alcohol may improve mental well-being, health-related quality of life. So the same issues here from this website, Healthline, how alcohol shrinks your brain. That's not good for your risk for dementia. Blackouts, dependence, hallucination, liver damage, lung infections, fatigue, pancreatitis, diarrhea, stomach problems, infertility. When you're in the hospital, you see all kinds of things there. But one of the worst is when somebody comes with that pancreatitis. And the majority of those are because of alcohol. So these people, they need to put a tube that goes through your nose all the way to their stomach. And they have them there all fasting. And the person feels terrible because that pancreatitis, the swelling of the pancreas, starts bothering the other organs around them with nausea and vomiting and all kinds of things. And for many, many days, why would you want to have that? It's not a good idea. Malnutrition, diabetes complications, damaging your nerves, thinning of your bones, muscle cramps. So one after another of problems that alcohol can potentially cause. Look at this one. A bottle of wine has the cancer-causing potential of 5 to 10 cigarettes. I'm telling you, it's dangerous. Every beer you drink takes 15 minutes out of your life, says this published paper. That's not a good idea. That is definitely not a good idea. Look at this one. Giving up alcohol by the age of 65 will help you to protect your brain from dementia. So never too late. The sooner the better. 3 harmful effects of alcohol. It alters the sleep architecture of sleep. So when you're sleeping, even though you're sleeping, you wake up not rested because it changes that architecture. It associated with depression, and it raises the risk of dementia. And we talked in the past about dementia, how that dementia is very high here in Australia. So you want to do things that decrease the risk, not that increase it. Even like alcohol consumption is linked to higher risk of cancer in Japan. Because that's what some people say, okay, I'm just going to drink a little bit. That little bit still increases the risk of cancer. This is from the European Union. Alcohol can be harmful to everyone. Alcohol is not good for health. Alcohol causes cancer. Alcohol is not profitable for governments. This is an official, graphic that the EU put out. Now, especially they worry them very much, as well as here in Australia, because they have this socialized medicine. The government here pays for the for the healthcare of their citizens. Well, when they have to face, the consequences, that's why they're trying to educate people to decrease and eliminate this alcohol. And look at this. Harvard has a lot of money. They have $39 billion of donations that people have given them throughout the years. What are they doing? They're buying vineyards, so they can go and plant more grapes. And are they going to do grape juice? No, isn't it? All these grapes, they're going to end up becoming wine, unfortunately. And this is one of the problems that people don't understand. How people that do research on alcohol, tobacco, or processed foods are threatened, intimidated, and discredited. So they end up paying, some unscrupulous person to go and try to criticize their work as if, your work on alcohol is no good and so forth. When the alcohol industry, notices that something is going against their agenda. Smoking and drinking can damage arteries very, very early in life. The audio person is in the back? Can you check the power in the back? Make sure that it's connected, and also make sure that it's plugged in correctly. And also follow the whole cable. Make sure that there's nothing disconnected. The cable as you follow. Yeah, there you go. That was the solution. There is no safe level of alcohol. It went down again, whatever you did. What we're getting wrong with alcohol guidelines. This is from the Sydney Morning newspaper, the newspaper here in Australia. Zero tolerance, no safe level of alcohol, study says. So as you can see, not even a little bit. As people say, well, doctor, what about a little bit? I tell them, well, what about if a little scorpion gets you? Is that good? It's small. It's still the same, isn't it? Still is a scorpion. Alcohol can impair hand-eye coordination after just half a beer, much lower than legal limits. So people think, just only one beer and so forth, I can drive. That's enough to start impairing your coordination. That's the reason why in certain occupations like pilots that fly the airplanes, no way they'll let you fly a plane if you just had one beer. That's enough for the pilot to do the wrong type of decisions. How alcohol, this is very worrisome, this study. How alcohol increases pain tolerance and aggression. Alcohol raises pain tolerance, but dulls, what is that? Empathy. Where was the empathy? Remember? In the frontal lobe. Increasing what? Aggression. Now the limbic system, that's where aggression comes from the limbic system. So you're suppressing the frontal lobe, limbic system is taking over. A new study reveals intoxication makes people more likely to harm others due to reduced sensitivity to pain. Very worrisome, very, very worrisome study. Alcohol increases risk for cardiovascular disease. And this one, alcohol must be recognized as a drug, says this British Medical Journal study. Alcohol must be recognized as a carcinogen. May God defend me from my friends. I can defend myself from my enemies, says Voltaire. So beware, alcohol is not your friend. Americans are drinking themselves to death at record level. Alcohol is killing Americans at a rate not seen in the last 35 years. And the problem is that Americans, through Hollywood and Netflix and so forth, what they do, everybody else wants to copy, isn't it? So not very good example that they are giving you. Any amount of alcohol consumption is harmful to the brain. There is no safe amount of alcohol consumption for the brain, with even moderate drinking adversely affecting nearly every part of your brain. A study in the UK of 25,000 people demonstrates. Behind the alcohol numbers, alcohol is killing more people than the opioid epidemic. Why aren't we talking about it? And inside that article is showing that alcohol causes 140,000 deaths each year. And the death rate has skyrocketed, with deaths directly attributed to alcohol increasing 26% alone. Why isn't alcohol getting more attention? It is quickly emerging as a leading preventable cause of death in the U.S. An estimated 1 in 5 deaths of people ages 20 to 49 can be attributed to excessive alcohol usage. So, very worrisome, isn't it? And why we're not talking about it? Because many times the authorities that are supposed to give us the warning signs, them themselves drink, So how can they be telling you don't drink if they are drinking themselves? Drinking alcohol makes you what? Older at the cellular level, and this is because of the oxygen-free radicals. Few things are more American than drinking heavily, but worrying about how heavily other Americans are drinking is one of them. Alcohol consumption caused cancer to 100,000 moderate drinkers on last year. Our study highlights the contribution of even relatively low levels of alcohol consumption to the cancer rates, which is worrisome. Frontal lobe, what? Damage from alcohol may occur before general mental status changes. So before we start noticing that the person is changing and so forth, like the beginnings of dementia or cognitive decline, the frontal lobe already has been damaged, and that's not good. Because one of the areas of the brain that gets damaged the most in dementia is the frontal lobe. You want to keep healthy your frontal lobe as much as possible. Heavy teenage drinking linked to abnormal brain development. As we mentioned, remember the frontal lobe, what age we said? 30 on the males, 25 on the females. So when the teenager is drinking alcohol, that brain is not developing correctly, and that's not good, because especially the frontal lobe is being impaired. Look at this one. This is the name of the study: How Alcohol Industry Organizations Misled the Public About Alcohol and Cancer. The alcohol industry knows that it's causing cancer. So through their marketing and through discrediting studies, tries to convince the public that that's not so. But when you go ahead and check the scientific literature, there's absolutely no question about it that alcohol, it is increasing tremendously the risk of cancer. Look at this one. I am surprised how happy I am after giving up alcohol. Look at that. They just try it for a month or so and suddenly start becoming happier. Now you know why. Remember, what did we say? Things that suppress the frontal lobe cause depression, cause mental health issues. If you stop harming that frontal lobe and start stimulating, you're going to see that your mood changes. You're going to become happier, secondary to stimulating your frontal lobe of your brain. So, IQ research prompts warning over drinking alcohol during pregnancy. Sadly, mothers that drink alcohol during pregnancy, they can affect the IQ of their babies, which is not good. Alcohol causes significant harm to whom? To others, other than the drinkers. And that's the problem, isn't it? When alcohol is there, well, the people that are close by start to suffer secondary to that. And that's something that we were documenting. This is another one of my studies. In this study, we found something very worrisome. Our sample was very big, 5,867 people in my sample. And we found that half of those people grew up in a home where alcohol was being abused. And that's not good. Because as you saw, you not only affect the drinker, but those people around them. And that's exactly what we show in this study, how the people that grow up in a place where alcohol is abused, their mental health can suffer later on in life. Maybe moderate drinking is not so good for you after all. And this is a secular newspaper, in England. Alcohol is killing more people and younger. The biggest increase are who? Among women. Historically, usually alcohol tended to be more of a male problem than a female problem. But now we're seeing an increased number of females drinking, and now the problems that used to fall on those males, now females are experiencing it. I quit alcohol for a month and was shocked at what happened to my memory. This is my third year as giving up for a month. It's a newspaper article. I'll reluctantly admit always make me feel better. Fascinating, isn't it? So not only your frontal lobe starts to improve, your temporal lobes, where your memory is located, and your hypothalamus start to recover from that damage. We drank for happiness and became unhappy. We drank for joy and became miserable. We drank for sociability and became argumentative. We drank for friendship and made enemies. We drank for strength and felt weak. We drank for bravery and became afraid. We drank to feel heavenly and end up feeling like hell. We drank for freedom and became slaves. That's the sad part, isn't it? And the reality of the alcohol, it is a bad deal. You give your part, and then what you're getting, it's actually worse. This is not a win-win type of situation. So what can we do to improve that alcohol? There's promises like this one, but thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. It's interesting to me. I have presented research on secular addiction meetings, and it's funny, you see the spiritual element over and over there, because you need a power bigger than yourself to help you overcome these addictions. In fact, this is another interesting study. This is JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, a secular medical journal, the top #1 journal in medicine in the world. Attendance at religious services and drug-related deaths and alcohol and suicide. Results suggest that frequent attendance at religious services is associated with lower subsequent risk of death from what? Hopelessness. And that's one of the factors that you get as you attend, to faith-based services. Your hope can increase. And that's something we need, isn't it? We need that hope to keep on going and so forth, so you can take advantage as you participate on these faith-based services. So, reminder that there's a few chapters there on addictions and so forth. My book is going to be available there in the back. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope to see you tomorrow. We're going to talk about an extremely important topic, a toxin that many people partake on a regular basis and they don't even realize what they're doing. So don't miss it, and bring your neighbors. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Eddie. That was very informative. Did you enjoy that presentation this evening? There was more than one drug that was pretty bad, but I think we found out there's a few things. And I was thinking, if somebody says to you that something is bad and you've been enjoying it, for example, you are liking that thing, and it's very important to you, it's very dear to you, and suddenly you listen to a lecture like this, and you find out, hey, maybe I shouldn't. Is it easy just to make an instant change? Is it? Is it easy? No, it's not. So some of you this evening, Dr. Eddie may have actually ruined your week because he's told you about caffeine, he's told you about nicotine, and he's told you about alcohol. But I just want to give you some hope and some encouragement that as we make these changes, we can see from the research that it's going to be much better for our health. How many of you realise that that alcohol was as implicated in cancer as he's been indicating tonight? How many of you knew that? Yeah? I have seen that before because I've listened to him before, but I find it phenomenal that it has such a high risk of cancer associated with alcohol use. So I wanted to show you a couple of things tonight, and also caffeine. That was very interesting that it was implicated in quite a lot of cancers as well. I think it said that it doubles the risk of bladder cancer. Doubles it. So I wanted to just encourage you a little bit tonight. If your evening has been challenged in that way, I want to just say sometimes it's very hard just to go slam. Is that true? You know, something you realise, you recognise, you've seen it, but you think, hang on a minute, how am I going to do this? How am I going to make these changes? I have found for myself, it's actually replacing something, not just removing something. If you just remove it and you go slam, then you will find a great big vacuum and a big hole in your world, and it will probably at times drive you back to it, right? But I want to show you some things. For example, we might take alcohol out of our life, but there are some very, very good alternatives. In fact, they have this beautiful sparkling grape juice. They have the pure juice of the grape as well that's not sparkling. So if you used to sit down to maybe a wine with your meal, why not try an alternative and put something else in your world that actually doesn't just leave a great big vacuum? And the other one for caffeine, there are some very, very good alternatives for caffeine as well. There's beautiful herbal teas that they bring out now that are caffeine free. And I promise you, it will feel strange for a while. Is that true? When you make a major change on something, it's going to feel strange. It's not going to be the same as your cup of Earl Grey that you have had for the last 30 years in the morning. But it is something to drink. I mean, we would just say to you, just go to water. Dr. Eddie would just say, just drink water. But sometimes replacements help us on the journey to making a full recovery, or, you know, to completely ridding ourselves of that. So there's excellent herbal teas. You have beautiful peppermints and strawberries and raspberries and rhubarbs and all sorts of things. And if you are a coffee drinker, they do have this Nature's Cuppa, which is a rich roast of its grains, roasted grains. And now, I promise you, I'm not going to lie to you, it's not going to taste the same, all right? So, but we are creatures of habit, and if you have got up every morning for the last however many years, and the first thing you do is make a cup of what? Coffee. So, going straight to a drink of water is probably going to be a very traumatic, leap. It's a leap. But I would just suggest to you that you try something like this. Now, I promise you, it's not going to taste the same. It is not. But you can actually literally force yourself to say, okay, well, I know, I'm warned it's not going to taste the same, but I'm just going to force myself to take something on board that is much better for me. So I wanted to show you that one of the ways to make these changes is actually through replacements. Just don't just drop it altogether. Don't just get rid of it altogether, but put something in its place that is a healthy option. Is that a good idea? Do you, yeah, that's just a little encouragement because tonight I think it's a no-brainer that caffeine and alcohol and nicotine are damaging to our bodies, aren't they? And our brains and these beautiful machines that we've been given. If it's damaging to it, what should we do? Now that we're informed, what should we do? Make an intelligent choice and say, okay, even though I love it, I'm going to swap it out. I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to make some changes. So at this church, not at the moment because I'm normally the person that run it, but we like to help people to make those changes and transition across to better ways of life. And we do a plant-based cooking class, which is not running at the moment, but it will be running back again in May, just to help you make those transitional changes into better ways of life. So I hope you found that helpful tonight. Go home, have a good think about it, think about the science, think about what Dr. Eddie's shared with us, and say to yourself, okay, I love it, but it's got to go. And all the best with that, and God bless you. So we've got some refreshments out there. We've got some lovely fruit and some muffins if you want to come and join us. I was going to make you some cuppas, but Lynn said to me, they won't drink it, Katie, because it's far too hot outside and they won't want hot drinks. So you can have a pure water and we can have a nice time together over some refreshments. Hope to see you tomorrow night. Bring a friend. We're a wee bit light tonight. Sometimes people have other commitments. We'd love to see you and we'd love to see somebody else. So thank you.